Hey people, so an unusual video today, one that is very off my normal subject matter, but something I think is interesting, a potentially unique insight, and no one's making anyone watch the videos, so off we go. I wanted to note something that I've experienced in relation to attempts at weight loss and attempts at diet change and such like that, due to the fact I'm a type 1 diabetic. Now, that's not a fact that I like to discuss in general on this channel. I have actually now mentioned it in the community page, but I don't like to mention it because people have a lot of very strange ideas about it. A lot of people don't know that there's a difference between type 1 and type 2, and a lot of people will say things like, yeah, I don't believe you have that problem because my friend who's a diabetic doesn't have the problem. And I've been a diabetic for a long time. I have various problems coming from it, and I really don't have time for that kind of thing. But I suppose I've got very, very little engagement on the YouTube channel, so it's very unlikely that that will become an issue, and if they were, I would just delete any comments that I found annoying. Or maybe it's not even rational. Maybe I can't even defend that rationally, having hidden that. But because I am a type 1 diabetic, now type 1 diabetic is when the immune system kicks back against the pancreas and destroys it, basically. If you have access to immune markers and such, you can actually measure this in a type 1 diabetic before the pancreas gets destroyed. This is not the same thing as type 2 diabetes because they are not even the same thing, really. It's called diabetes because it's the same organ and because it has the same manifestation, but that doesn't mean it comes from the same place. Type 2 diabetes comes from insulin resistance, and that's to do with weight, but I won't go into that. That's not what this video is about. This is just the introduction. But because I am a diabetic, type 1, and I do inject insulin, I have a lot of insight into things that people just don't have any conception of, and why would they? So when a normal person, a non-diabetic, eats some food, they don't think, oh, this food is going to cost 6 units of this type of insulin. It just isn't a thing for most people. And because of that, as I have tried to weight loss for the first time in my life, actually, I've noticed patterns that I think might be interesting, so I wanted to share them. So first we'll go through the basics. There is a reason for this. This little red circle here is a morsel of food. So it's a piece or unit of food or sugar, as we might think. Then this here is a unit of insulin. For this example, obviously things are going to be very simple. We're not going to go into numbers or any complexity. The way it basically works is you eat something, the insulin takes the converted energy to your cells to be put into your cells so that those cells have energy and can be doing things such as physical exercise. But of course, you need a certain amount of energy for most of your bodily functions. So you'll be using up a small amount of sugar in a fairly sedentary way. For this specific example, the unit of food versus the unit of insulin is the amount that we are using when the person is sedentary. And as you can see, I've drawn a diagram off here. The top is the actual energy that the body has used in relation to the exertion, walking, whatever it happens to be. And the bottom is, say you are consuming more than you need, say you are consuming more than the exertion required. This other one down here goes into either some sort of energy store, but it's likely to go into fat, especially if the person is sedentary, because fat is how a lot of the energy is stored in the body. So if a person is sitting indoors, not doing a lot and eating a lot, then that's how it will go. There'll be less and less energy needed for exertion, and more will just go into fat. And that's how people gain weight. The reason I came out with this example is because exercise is important here. When we do exercise, the amount of insulin we actually use is far less. And I've shown that with this diagram here. The insulin, let's say, is about half. So we only need half the amount of insulin to digest the same amount of food. And then the energy expenditure is completely different. And it's likely that in heavy energy expenditure, hardly any will be used as fat. But it seems likely that, from my experience, even when you are using energy, some is still sent to fat. This here is your non-weight loss system. So this is where you eat how much is comfortable due to your habits, and you do the same amount of exertion as normal. Your body, I believe, gets into a pattern. Now, for someone like me, I know what the pattern is because I'm doing a certain amount of insulin a day, and I do different types of insulin. But my theory here is where it lines up between my experience and people without diabetes experience is when I change the amount of insulin that I have to have in a day, it can take a while. So it can take about 3 to 7 days before there's actually a shift. And I wonder if with most people, this is the same thing. When you do exercise, if you are suddenly doing more exercise in a day, your body isn't automatically able to put out the extra exertion and the extra health. In order to do that, you have to work up to it. And I wonder if the body gets in patterns of producing a certain amount of insulin per day, and in relation to certain meals and things. And I wonder if this is the key to some people's experiences, I'm guessing to. So what you would think would happen, and this is, like I say, I have different insulin, so I can moderate the day-to-day as well. So what you would think would happen was if you eat less food, you do less insulin, and that this carries on each day. What I found was when I ate less food, on the second day, despite not doing a lot of short-term insulin, I would absolutely plunge. Like, for no reason, I would just be sitting there not doing much, and my blood sugars would plunge, and I'd have to eat loads of sugary food. So this is my theory of how it works. The long-term insulin you have in your body stays at roughly the same rate. So you have the same issue here. You have less food going in, but the same amount of insulin comes out. This means that the insulin running around in your system is carried over to the next day, and the next day, when you eat, and you're still eating less because you're still on the diet, you produce about the same amount of insulin again, and this is when you get the unbelievable plunge, or this is when I did. Why does that matter? The reason I believe this matters, the reason I'm bringing it up to what is likely a non-diabetic audience, is that this is where people are getting hunger pangs, and this is why they are so dizzying and unpleasant. And knowing this kind of potentially accurate understanding behind how your body works might make you feel a bit better about those hunger pangs. So this is how I think it can work. I'm not absolutely sure about this, but this is just me thinking it through. At first, when you start losing weight, you lose a lot. I actually lost a bit too much when I started. Losing 3 kilograms in a few days is not healthy. And as we know, most of that is water weight and things like that. But first you go down, and then people are obviously going to get hunger pang at this point here. My thoughts is that when you get to this point here, immediately after eat high volume, so things like potatoes and soups and homemade things, salads, high volume nutrient dense food, because your hunger should be very high here because the insulin hasn't adapted. Then you get to the top and you feel a bit crap, or I do, and then you can't really eat that much. But the thing is the insulin has adapted, so the hunger pangs shouldn't be so strong after that point. And a second point of having the nutrient-rich food, which might be meat as well, is you don't get a nutrient deficiency, because if you have a nutrient deficiency, your body's just going to override you. It doesn't matter what diet you're on and how much self-control you have, your body's going to be like, I need to survive, I'm overriding you. Another short point I thought I'd make here, I've noticed there's a kind of resistance line when you're losing weight, like you bounce from one line down here. And so my thought is you just kind of go up and down while getting this right, and eventually you go through the resistance line. Yep, and that's everything. I hope this is interesting or useful and doesn't seem pretentious, because I haven't been doing weight loss that long. And these are just my ideas. I'm not saying they're correct ideas, but I do think, so for me personally, I have known about the idea of burning sugar, burning fat, ketosis, the wall, and all of that stuff way before I ever needed to know it. It's very basic and easily understood for me because I have worked with it for so long. So I know when I'm going to ketosis and all that kind of stuff. And so I potentially have a perspective on it. Anyway, thank you for listening.